in my opinion, Manny Stewart is the greatest boxing trainer of all time. And certainly, when you look at his track record, is second to none. But even someone as successful and experienced as Manny Stewart, the now late Manny Stewart, even someone as successful and experienced as him, still gets things wrong, still gets predictions wrong. He still, you know, he would still look at certain fighters and not be able to accurately assess what that fighter's strengths and weaknesses are going into a fight, because he'd be surprised by certain things a fighter was able to do in a fight. And the thing about Manny Stewart is he was very big on technique. You know, throughout the 90s, when he was training fighters, he'd look at guys like Roy Jones Jr., Prince Nassim, who he briefly trained or co-trained with Oscar Suarez. He'd look at a lot of the unconventional fighters, and he wasn't impressed. You know, he always said about Roy Jones that he'd be a lot better if he learned to box, because right now he just fights like a very fast amateur. And he'd be a lot better if he actually learned some technique and learned how to box. This is what Manny Stewart was saying about Roy Jones at the time. The same with Prince Nassim. He looked at Prince Nassim and he said he'd be able to punch even harder if he learned correct technique. Because he's got natural power, he'd be able to increase that power with correct technique. So he was definitely a guy who didn't understand unconventional fighters. And he just looked at a guy like Roy Jones and said, you know what? His athletic ability is so incredible that he's able to be successful despite the fact that he doesn't have correct technique. Well, maybe the truth is actually the opposite of that. Maybe the truth is unconventional fighters like Roy Jones and Prince Nassim and even Marcus Maidana to a certain degree, that a lot of these unconventional fighters, they're not successful despite their lack of correct technique. They're successful, at least in part, because of their lack of technique, because they're unconventional, because they do things that opponents have never seen before. They do things that opponents are not expecting. They're unpredictable in the ring. And maybe that is closer to the truth. And certainly me, myself, I've been a guy who's definitely been guilty of the same thing as Manny Stewart was guilty of, in terms of underestimating unconventional fighters, looking at them and saying, oh, his punch technique is horrible, the way he throws his punches is awkward, even though I was a big admirer of Roy Jones in his prime. He was so quick and explosive and able to throw quadruple left hooks in the blink of an eye and all that kind of stuff. I was a big fan of his. But there was a lot of other fighters, unconventional fighters, and I'd look at them and say, oh, they're not throwing the punches correctly, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. So I've been guilty of that myself. Now, with Marcus Maidana, he got an extreme case, because I'm not being disrespectful, I'm just being real. The way he throws punches is like a novice. It's not even just like a normal amateur. He throws punches like a novice. In fact, I've seen novices that throw punches more correctly than Marcus Maidana. Okay? You would not look at that guy and say he throws a left hook well, or he throws a right hand well, or anything like that. All his punches look awkward, they look sloppy, they look amateurish, they look novice-ish. That's just being real. But the awkward nature that he throws his punches might be part of what makes him effective, at least against certain fighters. Maybe against Adrian Broner, because you're going to see Broner on Saturday night against Carlos Molina. That's not the Molina from light middleweight that some people are getting him mistaken for. This is the Carlos Molina that Amir Khan fought. And Molina's also a come-forward pressure fighter like Maidana. Not as big, obviously, not as strong, don't hit as hard. But he's a come-forward pressure fighter, but he's far more conventional than Marcus Maidana. Okay, so we're going to see how Broner is able to deal with a more conventional guy who throws punches from conventional angles. But Maidana would throw shots from such unconventional angles in such an awkward way that I guess it caught Broner off guard. He wasn't used to all that. And I think I've definitely been guilty of not giving Maidana enough credit for how savvy he is and how smart he is. And again, I think his lack of classic boxing technique of being able to deliver punches correctly, like deliver a left hook in a correct, like for example, Mike Tyson was a guy who's a pressure fighter, but he had almost impeccable technique. The way he'd throw his shots, his left hooks, his right hands, his uppercuts, it was almost impeccable. He wasn't a crude fighter at all, Mike Tyson. He had a lot of finesse to his game, and there was a lot of technical quality to everything that he did. Marcus Maidana's not like that. Everything he throws looks amateurish and horrible. But again, I might have been fooled into thinking that because he looks so amateurish and whatnot, novice-ish, that because he looks like that it means he's not a smart fighter, that he can't lay traps, set traps in the ring. And obviously he can set traps, because he set a trap for Adrian Broner in that second round with that left hook. The commentators pointed it out very well. He was jabbing to the body in the round before. He was bringing Adrian Broner's hand down, his right hand down, to block that jab to the body. Then he faked the jab to the body and came over the top with a left hook. And that was able to drop Adrian Broner and hurt him. So I think I've definitely been fooled into thinking that Maidana really is far more simple than he actually is. I think he does have a lot more guile and craftiness to his game than I've ever given him credit for. So we'll see if that applies here in this fight against Floyd Mayweather. I've predicted that Mayweather's going to win a pretty wide decision. But again, it might be a case of people like me looking at Maidana saying, you know what? This guy's way too amateurish. His punches are horrible. We might be placing too much emphasis on his lack of classic boxing technique and not paying enough attention to the stuff that he does do well in this fight. And maybe looking at the fact, again, like I said, his unconventional style might actually work in his favor, even against Floyd. That remains to be seen, but I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying it will, but I'm throwing it out there because I've only ever got one Marcus Maidana prediction wrong, and that was the Adrian Broner fight. And I knew Broner was not the second coming of Floyd. Go back and look at my videos. I'm not just saying this after the fact. I was never convinced by Adrian Broner. Even after his fight with Gavin Rees, I had serious doubts about him, and I made a video about it, which is still up, okay? So even though I was never convinced by Broner, I still thought he had enough to deal with Maidana, which he obviously didn't. And the reason why is because I'd seen Maidana, well, one of the reasons is because I'd seen Maidana get beat a bunch of times. I'd seen him have trouble in a lot of fights. So there were several reasons, but that was one of the main reasons. And the other reason was obviously because of Maidana's lack of technique. It's something that really irks me about Maidana and about a lot of fighters, actually, when I see them not throwing punches correctly, not, you know, throwing them in such a way to generate maximum power whilst protecting yourself, you know, if that makes sense. Tommy Hearns was a guy I liked a lot, the way he fought in terms of his punch technique, the way he threw the left hook to the body, the straight right hand. I really liked the way Tommy Hearns would fight, you know, from a technical point of view. He did certain things wrong. He made certain mistakes, obviously, but for the most part, his punch technique, the way he actually threw his shots, was almost impeccable, similar to a Tyson, in terms of the fact that there was very little wrong with his technique. They had slightly different technique, okay? They were different kind of fighters, but they didn't make that much technical errors, okay? So, yeah, long-winded video, I know, but I just wanted to put this out there and, you know, just give a shout out basically to the unconventional fighters out there, the guys who might not have the textbook technique, but that's part of what makes them effective, is their unpredictability and showing their opponent something they've never seen before. So anyway, drop your comments below. Let me know how you feel about what I've said in this video, and just give your opinion on it as well. This is Hatman, I'm out.